Welcome to the Bend Don't Break podcast. We are powered by The Source Weekly, Bend's locally owned newspaper. This podcast is our eddy in the rushing waters of local journalism. We are glad that you're taking some of your time to listen to us chat with the people who shape our local community.
Thank you to our presenting sponsor, RE/MAX Key Properties, a family-owned full-service real estate brokerage specializing in residential, luxury, commercial, new construction, and ranch and land properties. Their new state-of-the-art facility at 42 Greenwood Avenue is a modern, collaborative space and the new home of the Bend Don't Break podcast recording studio.
I'm Aaron Switzer, publisher of The Source Weekly, and this is the Bend Don't Break podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Today we are talking to Melissa Burr, founding winemaker at Stoller Family Estates. She is an Oregon native, and Melissa graduated from Portland State University with a Bachelor of Science degree, intending to practice naturopathic medicine before discovering her true passion in wine. She studied winemaking and fermentation science at Oregon State University and interned during harvest for several local wineries before becoming production winemaker for Cooper Mountain. Close. In 2003, Melissa joined Stoller Family Estate as the winery's first dedicated winemaker. During her more than 20-year tenure, she worked in concert with the vineyard team to oversee the site's continued refinement. In 2024, Melissa transitioned to the role of founding winemaker. Melissa, thanks for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'm fascinated by the swerve from naturopathic medicine to something that would be considered a different kind of medicine for people.
Yes.
Wine.
Yes, it can be considered.
So you stayed in field.
Yes, it can be considered, a medicine in moderation, like
Right.
everything. But yeah, I mean, what's interesting with the wine industry, especially in Oregon, is that it's young. It hasn't been around for hundreds of years, obviously. So most people that are involved are refugees, if you will, from some other thing that they thought they were going to do. And I think that it makes it really interesting. And myself included, I was really interested in medicine, and through kind of a roundabout way, got very passionate about naturopathic medicine. And then right when I got my pre-med degree at Portland State, really heavily focused on science, and got admitted to graduate school in Portland for naturopathic medicine.
You were pretty far down the road.
I was far down the road, and I got a bit of a cold feet situation going on, looking at the debt and the timing of school and such. And I was also getting really interested in wine. So having a lot of science and then having this newfound interest in wine, I thought that it could be interesting to take a detour and a pause, and instead of going right to graduate school, be an intern at a local winery to see what it was all about. So that's what I did. I was an intern at Cooper Mountain Vineyards in 2001. And I started there after a lot of persistence. I was really determined to work there because Cooper Mountain still farms and grows all of their grapes, not just organically, but biodynamically. So I called and finally got an answer, got the job, and the winemaker quit 4 days before harvest. And so I was able to do a lot more than I should have been able to really at the time. And I loved it. And since then, have been in the industry. I just kind of went full force into it. I was there for 2 years, got promoted to production winemaker, assistant winemaker situation, and then started with Stoller in 2003 when it was a quite small endeavor in terms of our wine brand, Stoller. The vineyard was there.
Stoller's an older brand, is it not? Or how long has the brand Stoller been around?
Well, the brand really started with the vineyard, and Bill Stoller planted the first 20 acres at his estate vineyard in 1995. And since then has planted that Dundee Hills estate vineyard to be just under 250 acres of wine grapes.
Wow.
And along the way, even before those first plantings, he was partners with Chehalem Winery in Newburgh. He was co-owner, and today he is the full owner of that brand. It's one of the 5 brands that are part of our Stoller Wine Group company. So that's how long, Stoller has been around. The wine label itself started in 2001 because in 2001, Bill Stoller had about 120 acres of wine grapes, and he sold them to a lot of producers. That was his vision, to be a world-class grower. Co-owned Chehalem. Chehalem made a little wine of the Stoller vineyard.
But mostly providing grapes to other people who are making the wine.
Exactly.
You'd be a farmer, more of a winemaker.
Be a farmer and get the name out there and grow. Dundee Hills is arguably one of the best places in Oregon to grow wine grapes. So he's got that going. And he wanted to make a couple barrels with his name on it, his brand. And when he hired me in 2003, his vision was to have a very boutique brand from his large estate site. And he wanted 4,000 cases over his lifetime. But he told me that would happen, and we've superseded that by quite a bit since then. But that's where it really started with the vineyard and the Chehalem ownership.
Okay, well, getting back a little bit to your trajectory is, I don't know the history of OSU's wine program or. But it seems like you were coming in and making this transition at a time when Oregon wineries were just getting that kind of like larger than base level recognition. Am I accurate in thinking that? Or when do Oregon wineries really start hitting the scene?
Yeah, it started, slowly, but with a small but mighty group in the 60s. Right? Just a few wineries, and then had grown. And there's been a few waves of rising up as a bulk of wineries. And Bill Stoller was really kind of in that second wave of pioneering Oregon. Okay. When I started in 2003, for example, there was, I believe, only something like 250 Oregon wineries. Right. And now there's over 1,000. So it was been building over the last 2 decades for sure. And Oregon itself has really gained world recognition because of the quality of grapes that we grow in our state. Right. And in particular in the Willamette Valley, where the majority, I believe it's about 70% of all the wine grapes in Oregon are in the Willamette Valley. And the most prevalent varietal is Pinot Noir. Mm-hmm. And so because of this, Oregon's known for quality Pinot. Right. Pinot is like the Goldilocks of grapes. It doesn't like it too hot, doesn't like it too cold. It has thin skin. It likes to have really a nice, slow, steady growing season and harvest time especially, or else it gets overripe or not ripe at all. So there's only a few spots really in the whole world that can grow high quality Pinot Noir, and the Willamette Valley is one of them. So because of that, Oregon has been doing that so well, and we've gained recognition, and then also more and more wineries are going in. It's by no means a huge industry when you compare it to even the United States. I mean, Oregon is number 4 in volume as a state for producing wine. California by far is a behemoth with about 95%. And then Washington, and then New York. I think that's still relevant. The Finger Lakes still, as far as I know, supersedes Oregon in volume. So we're small but mighty. Yeah. 4 doesn't seem small. 4 seems like out of 52 states. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You can, there's grapes in all states, but I mean, in all honesty, they aren't always the most amazing. Right. No offense to anybody out there, but I'm sure there's little spots. But wine grapes are also just like any other agricultural crop, need certain parameters to be successful.
Well, I remember when again, it's not my industry. I just remember when Washington wines took off, and they took off ahead of Oregon wines. And then I remember all of a sudden my father-in-law, who lives in Atlanta, he, of course, loves wine. I don't know why I say of course, but just because I know him so well. But, sure. And but he constantly talking about Oregon Pinots, and we were every time we would come back and visit, we were bringing Oregon Pinots, which at the time I didn't know much about. It was right during the 2000s, and then it just all of a sudden it was everywhere. And the Willamette Valley was well known, and that Dundee Hills, Forest Grove area. Just exploded, and you were right there for it.
Yeah, it's been a great trajectory for Oregon, and it's been very interesting for me to be able to be a part of it for that long and see the growth and see the momentum that we're getting as a state, and the positive impact it's making, and even the varieties that we do grow being accepted globally as some of the best wine grapes in the world. Pinot Noir is so versatile, and to me it's like the white wine of red wines. It goes kind of with everything. It's bright. Right. It's, pairs with food. And
how in your industry, especially during that time, how many women were in your position? Was it a mostly, I can imagine it was mostly a male environment.
And it still is, but
Yeah.
we did have quite a few, but not anything close to majority. It was few and far between. But that said, Oregon had been and still is recognized as having quite a substantial amount of women in production and all different roles in the winery, and more today. But I can't tell you the percent, but for sure is less than 20%.
Yeah.
And it still likely is. And I got lots of comments, of course, about that, especially when I was younger. I would like to talk to the winemaker. As you are talking to the winemaker, the real winemaker. I'm like, yeah.
Well, in 20, let's just say when you started out, if it's 20% now, it had to be 3%, 5% back when you started?
It was a little bit more than that. We had more than California, but it was the minority.
Yeah.
For certain.
Yeah.
But it's a great industry for anybody. And there's so many women getting into it, younger women and women that, are in all different areas in the wine industry, whether it being sales or marketing or production, winemaking and management and all that. There's a viticulture, all the vineyard operations. And
So when you first get to Stoller, what is it that you want to do when you take that job? I mean, you're hired on to do a boutique brand for that winery, but it pretty quickly changes to, no, we're going to be a full production operation. How does that happen?
It happened relatively organically over time, right?
Yeah.
It made sense. It made sense because we have recognized Oregon as a premier growing area. We have an owner.
You had a lot of grapes.
We have a lot of grapes. We have an owner who's very visionary and passionate. He's a third generation Oregonian, very successful businessman, dedicated to the land, grew up farming. This is the estate vineyard that Stoller is located, was his family's farm. And he purchased it from his uncle in the 90s and planted the vineyard. So he's got this, real connection to the land and the place and the people, and this passion for wine grapes and
great vision.
And a great vision, and it keeps going. And so that's kind of the root of it all, where it's coming from for all this growth. And then over time, we've recognized opportunities. The company's grown. We've got a really dynamic team.
Yeah.
Very innovative president, Gary Mortensen, that has been with Stoller for over 10 years and plus now, and just keeps growing the company. And there's opportunity, and that's what it's all about, is having that combination of where we are. We're always about these quality wines and being very authentic wines that are representing the place they're from, and then different ways of delivering them to people and experiencing them and in different formats and all that. And that keeps changing. And so that's what's interesting, is it's not the same. Nothing stays the same, obviously, but just as an example, the tasting room that Bill Stoller built in 2012 on this estate property was a pivotal time for us, because it really put the vineyard on the map for a destination to visit. This tasting room is located at the bottom of the hill in the Dundee Hills, looking up at this vineyard. These roll-up doors that open up. It feels like you're really outside.
Right.
And you experience, these wines in that format. But the point is, at that time, it was a tasting room that, a lot of the majority of traffic that was coming through was made by appointments and people that were, older, sometimes retired, had a lot of expendable income and such. There's a type, there's a type of person for the wine tasting, and now it's all types, which I love. And that kind of changed almost 10 years ago, but has been building. And I love that. There's so many more young people getting into wine than there was when I was a young person. Right. So it's neat to see people of all ages, and they want different experiences. And I think that's absolutely wonderful. I think there's wine is something that should be shared, and it shouldn't be an exclusive thing that has to have all of this, mystique and kind of intimidation around. If you don't know enough, you're never going to know enough about wine. Yeah. And if you say you do, you're probably someone that I don't really want to be talking to, personally.
That's great,
right. But it's neat to see that change and that growth in the wine community.
Yeah. Well, a couple of years ago, my wife and I love to vacation on the coast, and we started, as part of our trip, swerving around and visiting wineries, not swerving on our way, not after we got there, but we might swerve a little after. But but we started going and visiting things, and that is what I found so fascinating about it. Is one, all the wineries are so different, and I think when you initially start going to these Oregon wineries, you think, oh, well, I better dress up and put my coat on and it's going to be super formal. And a lot of times they're working farms, they're smaller. They might be a 3-person operation or they might be a large production operation. And the clientele is, man, it's everybody. It's such a great cross section. And that was really fascinating to me because it did open up the world of wines a little more to me as being, well, this is just regular folk, growing something, taking pride in creation. And then these are the folks that enjoy it.
Absolutely. That's one of the things I love about the Oregon wine industry is just that, the essence of that, and the diversity of experiences you can get. And they all seem to kind of come back to this passion that the owners and the people working there have for this product. This is not something that's made by a recipe. It's not a factory. And there's people having these beautiful wines served in their basement of the house that they live on the property of.
Right.
And there's these magnanimous, beautiful estate places you can go visit, and there's everything in between. So
some farm dogs running around, just like, we've occasionally, you're at a small enough wine where the owner is coming out and telling you about the other wineries in the area and gossiping, and it is super fun. Super great.
Yeah, there's a lot to discover, and it keeps growing. I mean, there's so many new places that I have friends ask me, "Have you been here and there?" I'm like, "Not yet. I'd love to," but that's part of the discovery process.
Right. Well, we're able to do this podcast today because you have moved here from the Willamette Valley. You're now a Bendite. How has that been possible, and what does that mean for you?
Well, I feel, first of all, very blessed that it has been possible. And I have a lot of my friends and colleagues ask me, how is this possible?
Right.
Well, it's possible for several reasons. One of them is, as you mentioned, my role has changed. My title has changed. And founding winemaker is what, we've come up with as a company. I've been obviously, with the place for a long time and involved with the winemaking. And I was one of 2 employees when I was hired in 2003. The first winemaker, had the great opportunity to make the wines from the site. It was almost like a blank canvas, and have grown with the company. And to date, we've got 3 winemakers and 3 different facilities. Great, big production team. We've got a huge viticulture team. The winery, the company has grown a lot. There's a lot more than 2 employees.
Right.
And so while doing so, my role has changed and evolved over time naturally. And it was most recently, before this recent change to founding winemaker, I was vice president of winemaking, working with these 3 extremely talented winemakers and helping with, production and blends. And at the same time, getting out and doing some travel with our sales team. Stoller wines, not just Stoller, but all the 5 brands, are distributed broadly in most states. And so we've got teams and we have distributors all across the United States. So I would go meet with our sales team in different states and help sell the wines, and then also be helping with the winemaking at home. Yeah. And so just more recently, after some thinking, I really wanted to do kind of one or the other. And I really do enjoy traveling and people and telling the stories of wines and getting out there and helping represent. So that's what I do the majority of now. And so because of that, I was able to foresee an opportunity to move to Central Oregon, which I've wanted to do for a long, long time. I'm from Oregon. I grew up coming here. We have a wine bar for the company. The Stoller Wine Group has the Stoller Wine Bar that we opened up right during 2020. It's in the box factory. Right. And that
walking distance from the source.
Yes, so. I love that too. And I love that building. So it's walking distance from the source. And so that happened. I started coming over here and I started dreaming about, man, I'd love to get to Central Oregon. I'd love to live there. I'm a skier. I have kids that love to ski, all these reasons, right? Sure. And then I thought maybe I can. And so it kind of percolated for about a year. Took about 6 months to convince my husband, we're going to sell our house that we've got in the valley and move to Central Oregon. But because of the opportunity to be able to travel and represent the brands, I can come in and out of Redmond, and I go back to the winery a few times a month and do things there too. Yeah. And then have the opportunity, which I'm really excited about. We've spoken before, and I'm really looking forward to things in the future with the community here in Bend. Yeah. It's just such a good fit for what our company's about, which is people, hospitality, wines, experiences, and all of that lifestyle. And, it's perfectly suited for Central Oregon. And because we have the Stoller wine bar here too,
Right.
and there's just
You have
endless
a
the home opportunities. And I'm really excited about all of that and really proud to be part of the Stoller wine bar, because that place, it's a great location. We've got really good product, but really what makes it amazing is the people there. Our team that works at that wine bar is phenomenal. It's like the unicorn team of people. They're just great. They're fun. They got, they want you coming in. It feels very comfortable. And the population of folks that are coming in there is very diverse, all different ages, people coming in, regulars.
I think it would be a challenge not to have fun working at a wine bar.
You'd
I
be
could
surprised.
see evolving from my position now to being a server in a wine bar.
Well, we can talk. I love this so much. There's always opportunity for you at any point, 100%.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you think so for sure. It's just, today it's hard to find. It's hard to find good employees and people that stick around and all that. So we've got something real special going on there, and
that's great.
There's just a tremendous amount of opportunity. I keep saying that word, but that's what I sense is really here in Bend. And there's great restaurants and collaborative things and events and all sorts of opportunities.
Well, it does feel like Bend has pivoted somewhat from craft beer. I mean, craft beer is still winning awards and dominating as a name for why we're here. But there's so many wineries that have come into the area, wine bars, and it's exciting to see. It's exciting to see the variety.
It really is, and it makes sense too, because whether people are coming from Washington or Oregon, it's not that far to have a estate vineyard or a winery in either of those states, and then have your wine bar here in Bend,
where it's sunny.
Yes, I love that so much. Yes, it's fabulous.
Well, Melissa, we're at the end of our time. Thank you for coming in. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to mention before we part and readers don't hear anymore?
Well, all I'd like to say is I'd really like to welcome everybody to come to the Stoller Wine Bar and experience what we're all about, and come in and have a glass of wine. We've got promotion going for all you skiers and snowboarders out there and Nordic skiers. If you have a pass or a lift ticket for January, if you come in and show that, we're doing 20% off.
Oh, wow.
But I'd also like to say, if you hear this podcast, I'm going to throw that out to the team
Oh,
too.
yeah,
if you hear the podcast and you want to come in and just say, podcast or the source, or
great.
It's Melissa, whatever, any of those things. I heard this on the podcast. You can get 20% off as well.
Great.
Or a glass of wine or a bottle
All
of wine.
right. Well, you heard it here. 20% off to say Bend Don't Break or Melissa or
Yes.
of the podcast.
Bend Don't Break. I love it.
That's awesome.
Come on in.
Well, Melissa, thank you for spending some time with us,
Thank
and
you.
Especially as the holidays approach. Listeners, if you like what you hear, go get your 20% and also become a member, support the source and our member program, and we'll continue to do more fun stuff like this with fun people like Melissa. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Bend Don't Break podcast, powered by The Source Weekly. To read, hear, and see more of what we do, go to bensource.com.